the wise men and Christmas. The mystery behind their gifts finally decoded. The night was serene, its silence broken only by the faint whisper of the desert breeze. The vast expanse of the heavens stretched endlessly, its stars twinkling with timeless brilliance. Yet one star shone brighter than the rest, commanding the attention of anyone who dared to look up. For those who noticed it, this star was not just light. It was a message, an invitation, a call to something greater. In the lands of the East, 3 wise men gazed upon the celestial wonder with hearts stirred by both curiosity and faith. These were men of great knowledge, scholars who had spent their lives studying the mysteries of the universe. Yet, in this moment, they found themselves humbled, as if standing on the edge of a revelation. Could it be that the star heralded the fulfillment of the ancient prophecies, the arrival of a king foretold for generations? Their hearts whispered yes, and so began a journey that would change not only their lives but the course of history. Leaving behind the comforts of their palaces, the wise men embarked on a trek into the unknown, guided only by the star's luminous trail. Their mission was as bold as it was mysterious, to find the king born under this divine light. They carried with them 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh, treasures carefully chosen, though even they did not yet fully grasp the depth of their significance. The journey ahead was long and uncertain, but their faith gave them courage. As they traveled, they spoke often of the prophecies that had ignited their quest. They had studied the words of the Hebrew scriptures, which spoke of a ruler to come from Israel, one whose reign would bring peace and justice. "A star shall rise out of Jacob," one of them quoted softly, the words lingering in the cool desert air. "A scepter shall spring up from Israel." The star they followed seemed to echo these words, pulling them forward with a sense of purpose that could not be denied. Yet the road was not without its challenges. The vast deserts were unforgiving, the nights cold and the days scorching. Their caravan moved steadily, but doubts crept in during the long, silent hours. "What if we are mistaken?" one of them asked one evening, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if this star leads us to nothing more than an ordinary child, in an ordinary town?" The eldest of the 3 turned to his companion with a gentle smile. "Faith is not about certainty," he replied. "It is about trust. We were not called to this journey by chance. The star shines for a reason, and we are part of a plan far greater than ourselves." His words comforted them, though the questions lingered. Why had they been chosen to undertake such a task? What kind of king would they find, and how could their gifts, a reflection of their own understanding, be worthy of such a one? These thoughts accompanied them as they pressed onward, the star a constant reminder of the divine hand that guided them. Their journey brought them through bustling villages and quiet plains, where they encountered people who marveled at their mission. Many were intrigued by the idea of a king whose coming was announced not by heralds or armies, but by the stars themselves. Some offered guidance, while others questioned the wisdom of following a celestial light. Yet the Magi remained steadfast, their hearts fixed on the goal. Eventually, their path led them to Jerusalem, a city alive with energy and tension. The news of their arrival spread quickly, foreign sages seeking the King of the Jews, asking where he might be found. Their inquiry reached the ears of King Herod, a man whose ambition was matched only by his paranoia. Herod summoned the Magi to his court, feigning interest in their mission. "Go and search diligently for the child," he instructed, his tone warm but his eyes cold. "When you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him." The Magi, unaware of Herod's true intentions, departed from Jerusalem with renewed determination. Yet something about the encounter left a lingering unease. As they traveled the final stretch toward Bethlehem, they spoke less, each lost in thought. Herod's words had stirred questions that they could not yet answer, but the star's light continued to guide them, its brilliance undiminished. When at last they arrived in Bethlehem, the star seemed to hover over a humble dwelling, its radiance illuminating the night. The Magi dismounted their camels and approached the door, their hearts pounding with anticipation. What kind of king would they find? A ruler clad in splendor, surrounded by wealth and power? or something entirely unexpected? As the door opened, the Magi's breath caught in their throats. Before them was not a palace, but a simple room. A young mother cradled her child, her gaze filled with a serenity that seemed almost otherworldly. Beside her stood a man, quiet and strong, his presence protective yet unassuming. The child, though ordinary in appearance, radiated a sense of peace that filled the room. The Magi knelt, their doubts and questions melting away in the presence of the child. They understood now why the star had guided them here, why they had felt compelled to leave everything behind and embark on this journey. This was no ordinary king. This was the fulfillment of every prophecy, the embodiment of divine love and humility. They offered their gifts with reverence, each one a reflection of the truth they now beheld. Gold for a king, whose reign would be eternal. Frankincense for a God, whose presence bridged heaven and earth. Myrrh for a Savior, whose sacrifice would bring redemption to the world. In that moment, they realized their gifts were not just treasures, but symbols of a divine mystery far beyond their understanding. As they departed, the Magi felt a deep sense of peace, yet their journey was far from over. They had encountered the divine, and it had transformed them. The star had guided them to a child, but the light they carried now was meant to guide others. This was only the beginning of a story that would ripple through history, touching countless lives. It is said that the Magi returned to their homelands, sharing what they had witnessed. Their story became a legend, inspiring generations to seek the light of the Christ child. It is a story that continues to speak to us today, reminding us of the hope and wonder of Christmas. The Magi's journey had taken them to the very heart of divine mystery. They had knelt before the child in Bethlehem, offered their gifts, and felt the awe of being part of something far greater than themselves. But as they began their return, the weight of their mission shifted. It was no longer just about reaching the child. It was about protecting the light they had found and carrying it with them. The streets of Bethlehem were still as the Magi prepared to leave. The star that had guided them to this place now seemed to rest, its mission complete. Yet a sense of unease lingered. The encounter with Herod in Jerusalem, though cordial on the surface, had left behind an unshakable feeling of danger. Herod's request for information, wrapped in the pretense of worship, now felt like a thinly veiled threat. Could a king so obsessed with power truly desire to kneel before a child? As they rested before their departure, the Magi prayed for guidance. Their journey had been marked by divine intervention, and they trusted that God would continue to lead them. That night, their prayers were answered. Each of them received a dream, vivid and unmistakable. In the vision, an angel appeared, warning them not to return to Herod. "Go home by another way," the angel instructed. "The child's life is at stake." The dreams left the Magi both shaken and resolute. Their mission had changed. They were no longer just witnesses to the light. They were now protectors of it. Without speaking, they understood that they must obey the angel's warning, even if it meant taking a longer, more dangerous route back to their homelands. As they prepared to leave, the youngest Magus turned to the others. "Herod's fear of this child is clear," he said. "What if our presence in Jerusalem has put the child in greater danger?" The eldest Magus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Our role is not to control the story," he said. "It is to follow the call we have been given. We cannot protect the child ourselves, but we can trust in the one who has guided us this far." With that, they set out under the cover of darkness, their caravan moving cautiously through the rugged terrain. They avoided main roads, relying on the guidance of shepherds and villagers who sympathized with their mission. At times, they moved in silence, their thoughts heavy with the realization that their journey had intertwined them with forces far beyond their understanding. Their conversations during the journey turned often to the gifts they had offered. The gold, a symbol of kingship, seemed obvious in its meaning. Yet the frankincense, associated with worship and divinity, now took on new depth. "This child," one of them reflected, "is not just a king of this world. He is the bridge between heaven and earth." But it was the myrrh that weighed most heavily on their minds. Traditionally used in burial rites, The gift had seemed fitting in ways they could not fully articulate at the time. Now, as they replayed the moment of offering it, they began to understand. "The myrrh was not for the child's death," said the eldest Magus. "It was for his purpose. His life is bound to a destiny of sacrifice, one that will bring light to the entire world." These reflections brought both clarity and sorrow. The Magi had set out on their journey in search of wisdom, but they had found something far greater, a glimpse into the divine plan for humanity. This plan, though beautiful, was not without its cost. It was a sobering realization, but it strengthened their resolve to obey the angel's warning and protect the child by any means necessary. The journey home was arduous. They avoided the familiar roads that had led them to Bethlehem, choosing instead the winding paths of the wilderness. The desert nights were cold, and the stars above seemed both vast and near, as if reminding them of the divine presence that had been their constant companion. They found comfort in the memory of the child, whose peaceful gaze had touched each of their hearts. At one point, as they rested under the stars, one of the Magi spoke softly. "We came seeking a king, but we found something far greater. What we found was the light of the world." The others nodded in agreement. They had not only witnessed this light, they had been transformed by it. Each of them felt a quiet determination to carry this light back to their own lands, to share the story of what they had seen and to live in a way that honored the child's mission. Their journey also brought moments of danger. Herod's reach was long, and they had to navigate carefully to avoid his soldiers. News traveled quickly, and the Magi heard whispers of Herod's growing paranoia. Some spoke of his plans to root out any threat to his throne, though the full extent of his actions was not yet known. The Magi prayed for the safety of the child and his family, trusting that the same divine hand that had guided them would continue to protect him. When at last they neared the borders of their homelands, the Magi paused to reflect on the journey they had undertaken. They had followed a star, knelt before a king, and witnessed the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. Yet they knew that this was only the beginning. Their role in the story was not to end in Bethlehem. It was to share what they had seen and to live in a way that pointed others toward the light. The youngest Magus, who had often struggled with doubt, now felt a deep sense of peace. "The star has disappeared," he said, "but the light remains. It burns within us, guiding us still." The eldest Magus, always the teacher, replied, "That is the nature of this journey. The star may fade, but its purpose continues. We have been given a gift, not only to witness the light but to carry it with us." As they parted ways, each Magus carried the memory of the child in his heart. They knew they would never again see the star that had guided them, but its impact would remain with them forever. They returned to their lands not as they had left, wise men seeking answers, but as bearers of truth, entrusted with the story of the light that had come into the world. The Magi's journey home was marked by moments of reflection as well as unexpected challenges. The path they had chosen was deliberately longer, skirting the familiar roads that might lead them into Herod's grasp. Though the angel's warning had been clear, the weight of their decision to defy a king was not lost on them. They were men of wisdom and influence, but they had now become protectors of a fragile and precious truth. The nights were colder than before, and the wilderness felt more vast and foreboding. But even as the journey grew more difficult, the Magi found strength in the memory of what they had witnessed. The image of the child in Bethlehem, cradled in his mother's arms and surrounded by a peace that seemed to emanate from heaven itself, gave them hope. Each step forward felt like an act of faith, a quiet affirmation that they were following the right path. As they traveled, their conversations turned often to the meaning of the gifts they had brought. "The gold," said one of them during an evening's rest, "was a tribute to his kingship. It seemed fitting at the time, but now I wonder, what kind of king is he? He has no palace, no throne, and no armies." The eldest Magus, always reflective, responded thoughtfully, "His kingship is not of this world. He does not reign over lands and borders. He reigns over hearts. And the gold was not for his wealth, but to recognize his worth." The youngest Magus, who had often been the most skeptical of the three, added quietly. The frankincense. I didn't fully understand it then, but now it feels so clear. It was not just a gift for him, it was a symbol of what he is. Frankincense is burned in worship, and worship is what we offered when we knelt before him. He is not just a king, he is God. The mention of the myrrh brought a long silence to their gathering. It was the most mysterious of the gifts, and perhaps the most sobering. Used in burial rites, it carried connotations of mortality and sacrifice. The myrrh, said the eldest, was the hardest to give. And yet, it was the most necessary. It is as though we were acknowledging, even then, that this child's life would be marked by suffering. That his mission would require the greatest sacrifice. The others nodded solemnly. Their journey had begun with a simple desire to honor the child foretold by the prophecies, but it had become so much more. They had not only found the king they sought but had glimpsed the contours of a divine plan, one that would unfold through love, sacrifice, and redemption. As the caravan pressed on, they encountered travelers who spoke of Herod's growing paranoia. The rumors of his fear and cruelty painted a grim picture of a king desperate to cling to power. Whispers of soldiers dispatched to Bethlehem reached the Magi's ears, filling them with both sorrow and urgency. They prayed for the safety of the child and his family, trusting that the same divine hand that had guided them to Bethlehem would continue to protect him. One evening, as they rested under the open sky, the youngest Magus shared a vision he had dreamed the night before. I saw the child again, he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. He was no longer in his mother's arms, but grown, walking among crowds of people. They reached for him, as though drawn to his light, but there were others, those who rejected him, who turned their faces away. The others listened intently. What did the vision mean? Asked one of them. I don't fully know, the youngest replied. But I feel certain of this. The child's path will not be easy. He carries the weight of something far greater than we can imagine. The eldest Magus, who had always encouraged reflection, spoke softly. What we have seen, what we have experienced, these things are not meant to stay with us alone. This light, this truth, it must be shared. Not everyone will accept it, but those who do will be changed, as we have been. Their resolve to carry the light of Bethlehem back to their homelands grew stronger with each passing day. They knew they had been entrusted with something sacred, a story that could transform hearts and inspire hope. Yet they also knew that sharing it would not be without challenges. The world, with its divisions and doubts, was not always ready to receive the light. As they neared the borders of their respective lands, the Magi paused to reflect on their journey. This was more than a quest to honor a king, said one of them. It was a call to become part of something eternal. And now, added another, the call continues. We must share what we have seen, so that others may follow the light as we did. The youngest Magus, who had wrestled with doubt and fear throughout the journey, now felt a quiet confidence. The star is gone, he said, but the light remains. It is not above us anymore, it is within us. These reflections stayed with them as they parted ways, each returning to his homeland with a story to tell. Their journey had begun as a pursuit of wisdom, but it had become an invitation to transformation. They had not only found the child, they had found themselves changed by him. The Magi's journey was behind them, but its meaning continued to unfold in their hearts. Each step away from Bethlehem carried them further from the physical presence of the child, but not from the profound impact he had left upon their souls. What they had seen and experienced in that humble setting, guided by the brilliance of a star, was not the end of their story. It was, in truth, the beginning. Back in their respective homelands, the Magi found themselves changed in ways they had not anticipated. The routines and comforts of their old lives now felt somehow distant. Their wealth, their knowledge, their influence, all of it seemed smaller in the light of what they had encountered. Each of them, in his own way, wrestled with the question, what does one do after kneeling before the divine? For the eldest Magus, the answer came in the form of teaching. He had always been revered for his wisdom, but now his words carried a new depth, shaped by his encounter with the child. He spoke often of the star that had led them, emphasizing that its light was not merely a guide, but a symbol of hope for all who seek truth. "The star shone for all to see," he would say, "but only those willing to follow it could understand its purpose." His students, many of whom had long sought his counsel on the mysteries of the universe, began to notice a shift in his focus. Where once he had spoken of the mechanics of the heavens, he now spoke of their meaning. "The stars declare the glory of the Creator," he told them one evening, "but their greatest purpose is to point us to Him. We followed a star, yes, but what we found was not a distant light. We found a King who reigns not in the heavens, but in the hearts of those who love." The youngest Magus, meanwhile, struggled to reconcile the visions that had come to him during their journey. The image of the child, peaceful and radiant, was a source of comfort. But the other visions, the serpent coiled around the cradle, the rejection and suffering of the grown man, were harder to bear. He prayed often for clarity, seeking to understand why the light of the world would also face the darkness of sorrow. One night, as he sat in quiet reflection, the youngest Magus recalled the moment they had offered their gifts. He thought of the myrrh in particular, the most puzzling of their treasures. At the time, it had felt like an intuitive choice, but now its meaning seemed both clearer and heavier. It was a gift for a savior, he realized. A symbol of the sacrifice he would make. This realization brought both sadness and hope. The youngest Magus began to share his reflections with those around him, speaking of the light that had come into the world, and the love that would sustain it. "The child's path will not be easy," he told a friend one evening, "but it will be worth everything. For his light will overcome the darkness." For the third Magus, the journey home had sparked a deep desire to understand the prophecies that had pointed them to the child. He immersed himself in the ancient texts, connecting the words of the prophets to what they had witnessed. He found comfort in passages that spoke of a suffering servant, a redeemer who would bring healing through his sacrifice. These words seemed to explain the mystery of the gifts they had offered and the destiny of the child they had adored. "The gold was for a king," he wrote in a letter to the eldest Magus. "Not a king of this world, but a king whose reign is eternal. The frankincense was for a God who is worthy of worship. And the myrrh was for a savior, one who would give his life so that others might live." These insights deepened his resolve to share the story of their journey, not for his own glory, but for the glory of the child. He began to write down their experiences, preserving the details of the star, the gifts, and the child's peaceful yet powerful presence. "This story is not ours alone," he wrote. "It belongs to all who seek the light." The letters between the Magi, carried by merchants and travelers, became a lifeline of shared reflection. Though they were separated by great distances, their connection remained strong, rooted in the transformative journey they had undertaken together. In one letter, the youngest Magus described a dream he had had of the child grown into a man. "He stood among the people," he wrote, "teaching with authority, healing the broken, and comforting the weary. His face was radiant with love, but I saw also the shadow of rejection. Yet even in that rejection, his light did not fade." The eldest Magus replied with encouragement, "What you have seen is not a warning, but a promise. The child's light will not be extinguished. His mission will be fulfilled, and his love will conquer all." These reflections sustained the Magi as they continued their separate journeys, each of them living out the truth they had discovered in Bethlehem. The eldest Magus devoted his life to teaching, the youngest to sharing his visions and encouraging others to seek the light, and the third to preserving the story for future generations. Together, though apart, they carried the light of the Christ child into their worlds, touching lives in ways they could never have imagined. Their story, though ancient, continues to speak to us today. It reminds us that the journey to seek truth and light is never easy, but always worth it. It challenges us to consider what gifts we bring to honor the King, and how we might carry his light into our own lives and communities. The Magi followed a star, but their true destination was not a place, it was a transformation of the heart. And this transformation is one we are all invited to experience. The Magi's journey is just one of many stories that illuminate the wonder and mystery of Christmas. Their courage, faith, and reverence remind us that the light of Christ is not confined to a single moment in history. It shines in every life that seeks Him. The journey the Magi had taken was one of discovery, but the meaning of their journey continued to unfold long after they left Bethlehem. What began as a search for a king under the guidance of a star had become an encounter with something far greater. They had seen a light that not only illuminated their path but transformed their understanding of kingship, divinity, and sacrifice. And now, that light guided their reflections, shaping their lives and their purpose in ways they could not have foreseen. The eldest Magus, back in his homeland, found himself often surrounded by students eager to learn from his wisdom. But his teachings now carried a deeper resonance, shaped by the truth he had encountered in Bethlehem. He no longer spoke merely of the heavens' mechanics or the patterns of the stars, but of their meaning. The stars, he would say, do not exist simply to light the night. They are messengers, pointing us to the Creator. And sometimes, if we are attentive, they lead us to something extraordinary. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, a student asked, "Master, what was it like to follow the star to Bethlehem? What did you feel when you found the child?" The Magus smiled, his gaze turning upward. "It was like finding the answer to a question I had carried my entire life," he said. "We sought a king, and we found one. But he was not like the kings of this world. He had no crown, no palace, and no army. Yet in his presence, we knew we were kneeling before greatness." The students listened with rapt attention, their imaginations ignited by his words. "And what became of the child?" one of them asked. The Magus's expression grew thoughtful. "His story is not one I was meant to witness fully," he said. "But the light we saw in him, that light will never fade. It lives on, in those who seek it, and in those who carry it forward." The youngest Magus, meanwhile, found himself wrestling with the dreams and visions that had come to him both during and after their journey. The image of the child's peaceful presence was a comfort, but the visions of his future, the rejection, the suffering, were harder to bear. Why must such innocence face such sorrow? He often wondered in his prayers. The question lingered unanswered, but his heart began to grasp that the light the child brought into the world was not meant to avoid the darkness, but to overcome it. One night, as he gazed at the stars, he remembered the moment they had offered their gifts. The gold had felt fitting for a king. The frankincense had been a recognition of divinity. But the myrrh, its meaning had eluded him at the time. Now, it felt painfully clear. The myrrh was for his sacrifice, he realized. For the love that would lead him to give everything for the sake of the world. This realization brought both sorrow and hope. The youngest Magus began to share his reflections with those around him, speaking not of the child's future suffering alone, but of the love that made such sacrifice possible. "His light," he would say, "is stronger than any darkness. It shines not to condemn, but to save." For the third Magus, the reflections took the form of study and action. He pored over the ancient texts, finding in the words of the prophets a profound connection to what they had witnessed. Passages that once seemed mysterious now unfolded with clarity, pointing to the child they had knelt before. "He is the fulfillment of these promises," he said to a friend one evening, showing him a scroll. "The king, the servant, the savior, all foretold, all revealed in that humble setting." This Magus took it upon himself to preserve the story of their journey, writing down their experiences and the truths they had come to understand. "This story," he wrote, "is not for us alone. It is for all who seek the light. It is a story of hope, of courage, and of the divine plan that continues to unfold." As the Magi lived out their respective callings, they remained connected through letters, sharing their reflections and the ways their lives had been shaped by their journey. In one letter, the eldest Magus wrote, "I often think of the star, its brilliance leading us to Bethlehem. But I have come to see that the true light was not in the sky, it was in the child. And though we no longer see the star, his light remains, guiding us still. The youngest Magus replied, I have dreamed again of the child now grown. He stands among the people, offering them love and truth. Some embrace him, others reject him. Yet even in their rejection, his light does not fade. It is as if the darkness itself cannot comprehend or overcome him. These reflections sustained the Magi through challenges and doubts, reminding them that the journey they had undertaken was not a single event, but the beginning of a greater story, one they were called to share. Each of them, in his own way, carried the light of Bethlehem into their world, planting seeds of hope and faith wherever they went. As the years passed, the Magi's story became a quiet legend, inspiring those who heard it to seek the light for themselves. Their journey was remembered not just as a tale of wonder, but as a testimony to the power of faith and the beauty of divine purpose. It was a story that spoke of a king who reigns in humility, a God who draws near, and a Savior who gives everything for the sake of love. And it is a story that continues to resonate today. The journey of the Magi invites each of us to reflect on our own lives, to ask what gifts we bring to honor the King, and to consider how we might carry his light into the world. It challenges us to trust the path, even when it leads through uncertainty, and to recognize that the greatest treasures are not found in earthly riches, but in the love that transforms hearts. If their story has touched you, imagine what more you could discover by diving into the lives of others who played a part in the first Christmas. The Magi's journey is one of many woven into the tapestry of that holy night. Stories of Mary's courage, Joseph's faith, the shepherds' awe, and more. Each one offers a new perspective on the wonder of the season. These stories come to life in The People of Christmas ebook, a collection that invites you to journey deeper into the heart of Christmas. The link is waiting for you in the comments below, ready to guide you into these timeless tales. The years passed, but the story of the Magi remained alive in their hearts and in the lives they touched. Their journey to Bethlehem was not simply a quest for a king, it was an encounter with the divine. And though their feet no longer followed the star, its light continued to guide their thoughts, their prayers, and their actions. The eldest Magus, now an old man revered for his wisdom, often found himself returning to the memories of that night in Bethlehem. He would sit beneath the stars, gazing upward as if searching for the celestial light that had once led them. It is not in the sky anymore, he would remind himself. It is within us, guiding us still. He shared this truth often with his students, whose lives had also been changed by his account of the journey. The king we sought, he told them one evening, did not reign from a throne of gold. His power was not in wealth or might, but in love, an unending love that has the power to transform hearts. We saw him as a child, but his presence filled the world with peace. The students, eager to learn, often asked him to recount the moment they knelt before the child. "What was it like, Master?" one of them asked. "What did you feel?" The Magus closed his eyes, the memory as vivid as the night it had occurred. "I felt as though I had found the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. We offered him gifts, thinking we were honoring him. But in truth, he gave us something far greater, a glimpse of the divine plan and the knowledge that we were a part of it." Meanwhile, the youngest Magus wrestled with the dreams that had continued to visit him over the years. The visions of the child grown into a man, the love in his eyes, the rejection he faced, the suffering he bore, were difficult to reconcile with the peace he had felt in Bethlehem. Why would such a radiant light endure such darkness? Why would one so innocent choose a path of sacrifice? One evening, after a particularly vivid dream, the youngest Magus confided in a trusted friend. "I saw him again," he said softly. "He was teaching the people, healing their wounds, and offering them hope. But there were others who rejected him, who turned away from his light. I don't understand. How can someone so filled with love be met with hatred?" His friend listened carefully, then replied, "Perhaps that is the nature of his mission, not to avoid the darkness, but to overcome it. His light shines not only for those who welcome it, but also for those who resist it. It is a light that cannot be extinguished." These words stayed with the youngest Magus, bringing him both comfort and clarity. He began to see his role not as one of understanding every mystery, but as one of trust in the plan that had been unfolding since the moment they first saw the star. He shared this perspective with those around him, encouraging them to seek the light in their own lives. "The star guided us to him," he would say. "And now, his light guides us still. It shines in every act of love, every moment of kindness, and every choice to trust in something greater." The third Magus, ever the scholar, immersed himself in the study of ancient prophecies, searching for the threads that connected their journey to the larger story of the child's mission. He found passages that spoke of a suffering servant, one who would bear the burdens of humanity and bring healing through his sacrifice. The words resonated deeply, aligning with the truths they had glimpsed in Bethlehem. One passage, in particular, stood out to him. "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. Yet he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows." Isaiah 53. The Magus reread the words, feeling their weight and their promise. This child, he realized, is the one foretold. His light is not a fleeting moment, it is the eternal answer to every longing, every question, every hope. He began to write down their story, carefully preserving the details of their journey, the gifts they had offered, and the truths they had come to understand. "This story," he wrote, "is not ours alone. It belongs to all who seek the light, to all who long for hope. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the light of love and redemption shines." The Magi's letters to one another became a lifeline, a way to share their reflections and deepen their understanding of what they had experienced. In one letter, the youngest Magus described a vision of the child's hands, outstretched in compassion. "His hands were scarred," he wrote, "yet they brought healing. His face was filled with love, even as he faced rejection. It is a mystery I cannot fully comprehend, but one I trust with all my heart." The eldest Magus replied with encouragement. "The light we saw in Bethlehem," he wrote, "was only the beginning. The child's mission will unfold in ways we cannot imagine. But one thing is certain, his light will never fade." These exchanges strengthened the Magi's resolve to live out the truth they had discovered in Bethlehem. They shared the story with those who would listen, planting seeds of hope and faith in their communities. Their lives became a testament to the power of love, the beauty of sacrifice, and the promise of redemption. The Magi's journey had ended, yet its meaning continued to shape their lives in ways they could not have imagined. The star that had once guided their steps to Bethlehem now shone in their hearts, a constant reminder of the King they had knelt before. They had sought wisdom, but what they found was a truth so profound that it transformed not only their understanding but their very purpose. Each of the Magi returned to his homeland carrying the light of that encounter. For the eldest Magus, this meant becoming a teacher of a wisdom that transcended the stars he had once studied. He spoke often of the journey, not as an adventure but as a calling. "We followed a star," he would tell those who gathered to hear him. "But what we found was not just a king. We found the meaning of kingship itself, a king who rules not with power, but with love." His words resonated deeply with his listeners, many of whom began to see their own lives in a new light. "Master," one student asked during an evening gathering, "if the king you found is so great, why do we not hear of his armies, his victories?" The Magus smiled, his gaze thoughtful. "Because his victory is not won through conquest, but through transformation. He does not take lands or build empires. He wins hearts. And those who follow him carry his light into the world, just as we were called to carry it from Bethlehem." The youngest Magus, meanwhile, struggled with the visions that had continued to come to him. The image of the child was always accompanied by a deep sense of peace, but the visions of his future, the rejection, the suffering, were harder to bear. He often found himself asking, "Why must the light face such darkness? Why must such love endure such pain?" One night, after a particularly vivid dream, the youngest Magus confided in a close friend. "I saw him again," he said quietly. He was surrounded by people, teaching them, healing them. But not all of them welcomed him. Some turned away, their faces hard with anger. And yet, he continued to love them, even those who rejected him. His friend listened carefully, then replied, "Perhaps that is the nature of true light. It shines for everyone, even those who try to avoid it. Perhaps his love is not diminished by rejection, but made even greater by his willingness to offer it anyway." These words brought clarity to the youngest Magus's heart. He began to understand that the path of the child, the path of the king, was not about avoiding darkness, but about overcoming it with light. This realization shaped how he lived and how he shared the story of their journey. The star led us to him. He would tell those who listened. And now his light leads us. It is a light that does not fade, no matter how deep the night. The third Magus, ever the scholar, devoted himself to studying the ancient prophecies that had guided them to Bethlehem. In the sacred texts he found words that seemed to echo their experience. One passage stood out above all others. "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shined." Isaiah 9 verse 2. The Magus read these words again and again, marveling at how they described not only the child but the journey they had taken to find him. In his writings, the third Magus preserved the details of their journey, the brilliance of the star, the gifts they had brought, the humility of the king they had found. He wrote not for his own glory, but to ensure that the story would live on, inspiring others to seek the light. "This is not just our story," he wrote. "It is the story of all who long for truth, for hope, for redemption. The light we found in Bethlehem is a light for all people." As the years passed, the Magi remained connected through letters, sharing their reflections and the ways their encounter with the child continued to shape their lives. In one letter, the youngest Magus described a vision of the child's hands. "They were scarred," he wrote, "yet they brought healing. His face was filled with love, even as he faced rejection. It is a mystery I cannot fully understand, but it fills me with hope." The eldest Magus replied, "The light we saw in Bethlehem was not just for a moment, it was for eternity. That child is the King of all kings, and his light will never fade." Through their letters and their lives, the Magi carried the light of Bethlehem into their communities. Their story inspired those who heard it to consider their own journeys, to ask what light they were following, and what gifts they could offer to honor the King. The Magi's lives became a testament to the power of faith, the beauty of humility, and the promise of redemption. Their story continues to resonate today because it speaks to truths that transcend time. It challenges us to seek, to trust, and to follow the light, even when the path is unclear. It reminds us that the greatest gifts we can offer are not material treasures but the offerings of our hearts, our love, our faith, our willingness to carry the light into the world. What about you? What light are you following? What gifts do you bring to honor the King? The Magi's journey is an invitation for all of us to reflect on these questions, to seek the light that leads us to the truth, and to carry that light into our lives and communities. The story of the Magi, like the star that guided them, continues to shine. Though their journey ended long ago, its light remains, illuminating the hearts of all who hear it. Their story is not just about three men who followed a star to find a child. It is about a search for truth, an encounter with the divine, and the responsibility to carry that light into the world. The Magi's lives were forever changed by what they found in Bethlehem. Each of them returned home with a profound sense of purpose, but also with questions that lingered in their hearts. What they had seen was as humbling as it was transformative: a king without a palace, a savior wrapped not in royal robes but in swaddling clothes. It was a paradox of power and humility that redefined their understanding of greatness. The eldest Magus spent his remaining years teaching this truth, weaving the lessons of their journey into his conversations with students and travelers. "We were wise in the ways of the stars," he would say, "but it was the child who taught us the true meaning of wisdom. It is not found in books or charts, but in the love that transforms hearts." His teachings became a source of inspiration for many, who began to see their own lives in a new light. One evening, a young scholar asked, "Master, if the king you found is so great, why do we not see his rule? Where are his armies, his conquests?" The magus smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "His kingdom is not of this world," he replied. "He does not rule with might, but with mercy. His victories are not over lands, but over hearts. And those who carry his light are his messengers, spreading his love to the ends of the earth." The youngest magus, who had been deeply affected by the dreams that continued to visit him, found himself drawn to the mystery of the child's future. The visions he had seen, the joy and the sorrow, the light and the shadow, were not always easy to understand. Yet they filled him with a sense of hope that outweighed his doubts. In one particularly vivid dream, he saw the child grown into a man, walking among the people, healing their wounds and speaking words of life. But he also saw rejection, faces turned away, hands raised in anger. And then, at the end of the dream, he saw light breaking through the darkness, filling the sky and drawing all people to it. When he awoke, the youngest magus reflected on what the dream might mean. His light is not for some, he realized. It is for all. Even those who reject him cannot extinguish it. His love is greater than their hatred. His light will overcome the darkness. These reflections shaped how he lived and how he shared the story of their journey. He spoke not only of the star and the gifts but of the love they had witnessed in Bethlehem, a love that continued to guide them. "The light we followed," he would tell others, "is the same light that now leads us. It shines in every act of kindness, every moment of faith, every choice to love." The third magus, ever the scholar, dedicated his life to preserving the story of their journey and connecting it to the prophecies they had studied. He wrote of the star, the gifts, and the child's radiant presence, but also of the deeper truths they had come to understand. "This child," he wrote, "is the fulfillment of every promise. He is the King who brings peace, the God who walks among us, the Savior who gives his life for the world." He found particular solace in the words of the prophet Isaiah. "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Isaiah 9 verse 6. These words, which had once been distant and abstract, now carried the weight of lived experience. They were not just prophecies, they were truths the Magi had seen with their own eyes. Through their letters, the Magi remained connected, sharing their reflections and encouraging one another in their respective missions. The eldest magus wrote, "The light we saw in Bethlehem was not just for us, it was for the world. And though the star is gone, its purpose continues. We are called to be bearers of that light, to carry it into the places that need it most." The youngest replied, "I have seen him again in my dreams. His hands are scarred, yet they bring healing. His face is filled with love, even as he faces rejection. It is a mystery I do not fully understand, but one I trust with all my heart." These letters became a testament to their shared journey, a reminder that their story was not simply about following a star, it was about following the call of God. They had sought a king, but they found a savior. They had brought gifts, but they received something far greater, the knowledge that they were part of a divine plan that would ripple through eternity. Their story challenges us to consider our own journeys. What light are we following? What gifts do we bring to honor the King? And how do we carry his light into the world around us? The Magi's journey is not just a tale of the past, it is an invitation for all of us to seek, to trust, and to follow. And their story is just one chapter in the larger tapestry of Christmas. The Magi were joined by others who encountered the Christ child, Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, each with their own unique role in the unfolding of this divine mystery. Their stories, too, are filled with wonder, courage, and transformation. If this story has touched your heart, there is so much more to discover. The Magi, the shepherds, Mary, Joseph, each of their lives reveals something profound about the meaning of Christmas and the light that continues to shine. These stories come to life in The People of Christmas ebook, a collection that invites you to journey deeper into the heart of Christmas. You'll find the link in the comments below, ready to guide you into the timeless truths and wonders of this holy season. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the story of the Magi and the light of Christmas. If this touched your heart, there's so much more to explore. Be sure to subscribe to stay connected, as we share more inspiring stories that bring the true spirit of the season to life. And don't forget to click the video on your screen to dive deeper into the lives of the Christmas people and their timeless lessons of faith and love. Your journey doesn't end here. Let's keep discovering together. Click now, and we'll see you in the next chapter.